turns out he got a diagnosis of macular degeneration, and he decided he was going to walk home and see America before he went blind. I mean, I thought I was, doing something. Here's a guy who's walking. And mind you, he's gone from Seattle to Kansas on foot. And so I was just asking him about how he was doing it and what kind of gear he had. He said, gear? I said, yeah, what kind of shoes you've been wearing? He said, he said, just pointed down to the ground. He said, I picked these up for $15 at the Walmart. They're working just fine for me.
Episode 395, a summer break revisit with Tamela Rich to talk about motorcycle touring. This episode is brought to you in part by Kind. Kind makes delicious, healthy snacks using whole ingredients. If you guys haven't tried it yet, their pressed bars by Kind are the best in my opinion. Go try the mango apple chia. It's awesome. We've got a special offer for you guys to try 20 Kind snacks with their new snack pack. You can enjoy 50% off and free shipping on your first snack pack when you subscribe to it through Snack Club, which is Kind's monthly snacks subscription service. Go to kindsnacks.com/sports for more details. That's kindsnacks.com/sports to learn more and to subscribe to the snack pack. You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast, brought to you by 180 Tack. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Welcome to another episode of the Adventure Sports Podcast. Tamela Rich began her love affair with the open road as a child, traveling with her family in the Vista Cruiser wagon from Ohio to California every other summer. She rediscovered America in the wake of the personal crisis when she learned how to ride a motorcycle and took her first solo cross-country ride. Tamela learned to ride when she was 48, and 3 months after getting her motorcycle endorsement, took off on an 18-state, 7,500-mile solo trip from North Carolina to Oregon and back. Since then, she's traveled 47 states and 5 Canadian provinces on her motorcycle, mostly solo. Her award-winning book, Live Full Throttle, Life Lessons from Friends Who Faced Cancer, was based on 2 years of cross-country motorcycling for cancer causes. Tamela, thanks for joining me.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Travis. Thank you.
I'm glad to have you, absolutely. So I read off your bio. Take some time and tell us more about who Tamela Rich is and how it is you got started in riding motorcycles.
I had always wanted to travel. And like so many of us, we put it off. We think, I need a lot of money to be able to travel. And so we, strap ourselves to these demanding jobs because they're the ones that are going to make us this money. And pretty soon, you have 3 or 4 weeks theoretically of vacation, but because you want to prove that you're a committed member of the team, you never take all your vacation and your life drains away before you and you're not traveling, you're not doing the things you want to do. And so I got to a point where I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And my dad and my brother in 2008, it was right when iPhones, came out, like not the, like the first month or anything, but it was very, close on after the first iPhone iteration. And my dad and my brother got iPhones and motorcycles. They decided they wanted to do mail bonding, and they didn't want to do something that one already knew how to do really well. They wanted to sort of learn together. And so they got GS bikes, dual sport bikes. And my brother lives in Ohio, and my dad at the time was living in Las Vegas. And so they met and toured, all the national parks and national monuments out there. And I would get these emails from their iPhones. I had a flip phone at the time, and what was this coming through my email? They had, videos from their phones and audio files and snaps and all this from out west. And it just bit me hard. And I said, I have got to do this. So, I had, as my bio mentioned, I had a personal crisis, and a business that I had owned failed badly in the, Great Recession. And I got this earworm that said, you've got to learn how to ride a motorcycle and take a cross country my motorcycle trip. It's like, are you a parent, Travis?
Yes, I
All
am.
right. So you remember the first time your wife was pregnant and suddenly all you saw were pregnant women on the street, right?
Yes, that's what happened.
That's how it was for me. Like everywhere I looked, there were motorcycles. Like it was just totally top of consciousness, and it was relentless. Just you've got to learn to ride a motorcycle and take a cross country motorcycle trip. And I really saw it as an opportunity to relaunch my life. I had been really emotionally and spiritually and from a mental health perspective taken down with that business. I was suicidal at a certain point. And so, this thought of a motorcycle was the first like spark of life that I really had. It really saved my life in a way. It really gave me back a will to live. And so anyway, so we were broke. The business had taken us out financially. And so I had no money to buy a motorcycle, no money to buy gear, no money to buy a helmet, no money for gas, no money for a bike. I had no money for anything. But yet, like this very pleasant, persistent little voice just kept telling me to do it. And so I just put it out there and I said, okay, I announced like my birthday's in January. So I know it was in January sometime. I just started telling people, hey, I'm going to learn to ride a motorcycle and I'm going to take a cross country motorcycle trip from North Carolina to Oregon and back. And
I'm sure you had a few responses to that.
Well, people, my family, first of all, my family didn't think anything of it because they, of course, knew what position we were in. And, they just thought I was, daydreaming and that was just fine, but they didn't think anything of it. But I started asking people, do you know anyone who fill in the blank, who knows someone who could help me learn how to ride? Or, I just kept asking. So I was working on a book project with a friend who lives in Bend, Oregon. And he had a bunch of obscure books that I needed to, get my hands on physically. They weren't available, digitally. I needed to get my hands on them for this book project, and so that's why Oregon. So I didn't want to, I didn't want to fly out there. I wanted to learn to ride a motorcycle and ride out there, and so he became my first sponsor. He PayPal'd me. It was like I think it was about $250. As a first sponsor to take my motorcycle class at the local community college.
No kidding.
No kidding. And I didn't have money for a helmet, so another friend loaned me his motorcycle helmet. So I took my class in a borrowed helmet. And but I did really well in the class. And one thing led to another, and social media in 2010 was nothing like it is now. There wasn't, advertisers hadn't caught on to how to use it, and there wasn't a lot of spamming in the stream. It was a lot of really genuine connections. And so people, like, I put it out there that this was what I was going to do, and people got really excited about watching me go from zero to a cross-country motorcycle trip. And so a connection started being made, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. And so after I got my endorsement, I still didn't have a bike. I still didn't have anything I needed except the endorsement. So I had that, but I would just tell people, this is what I'm going to do, and do you know anybody who can help me? And help started coming my way. So eventually, the short story is, I got everything I needed. A former highway patrol officer who has a motorcycle training school here in North Carolina. He tried to talk me out of it, but because he said, well, take a year and ride, take some weekend trips, you can imagine a highway patrol officer has seen like every kind of grisly outcome imaginable. But when he was determined that I was, not gonna take no for an answer, he offered me a seat in an upcoming training class. And he had school bikes, so I didn't have to have my own bike. And so I was able to take his class. My brother, now, are you a motorcyclist? I didn't ask you this.
Yeah, I've been riding since I was about 9 years old.
Oh, well, you know that any bike you learn on will suffer for you.
It's true. It's true.
And so my brother was very kind. He also didn't want me to do this, but he said, you know what? I want you to have every advantage. So he lives in Ohio, as I mentioned. I live in North Carolina. So he said, you come up here and, I'll put you up on one of my bikes and we'll see how you do. So I went up there and so he gave me training. And then I hope this is inspiration for people. I learned that BMW had a training school in South Carolina, about an hour and a half from me, in Greer, South Carolina. That's where they have their auto assembly plant. And they have a museum there. They have a wonderful training facility. You can go down there and take delivery of a car. If you buy a BMW, you can take delivery down there, and they'll put you through a day-long school. You can take longer schools if you want. You can learn how to drive like James Bond in an M car, as a matter of fact. Well, anyway,
really?
Yeah. And so BMW made motorcycles before they ever made cars. And they have an on-road and off-road motorcycle training program down there. So this is the inspirational part. I was just, talking every time I had a conversation with someone, I'd say, do you know anybody? And so I was talking to a friend of mine, and we all know somebody who knows everybody. And I had this friend who fits that description. And I told him, hey, how you been? What are you up to? That kind of thing. I hadn't talked to him in a while. And so I told him what I was up to. And I said, hey, by any chance, do you know anyone down in South Carolina at the BMW Performance Center? I swear to God, Travis, he said to me, Tamela, I'm heading down there this afternoon. I know the manager of the Performance Center. Let me see what I can do for you. I am not even kidding. That never happens, right? But it happened.
So, man, that is phenomenal. I need to know your friends.
Any friend of mine is a friend of yours officially. That's the way it rolls now. But anyway, so I got 2 days of training down there, and in a very short story here, I also got the bike that I needed. So it just for anybody, I know you mentioned that a lot of people listen to the podcast for inspiration, and I'm just here to say, if you want to do something, put it out there, ask for help, and sometimes, if it's the right thing, unbelievable mountains get moved out of the way and the road is clear and you get a chance to pursue your dream. I did.
Wow, that's awesome. Especially in this day and age, because we look around, everybody seems to be getting a deal, where, give me a bike and I'll ride around the world, or give me an RV and I'll go live in it. And I think, and a lot of people would probably think, well, it's been done.
Right.
Why are they going to give it to me? They've already had, 12 people walk in the door in the last week looking for the same deal. But you're proof that it really does happen. If you put it out there and dream about it and work towards it, it happened.
It happened. I mean, I do think there's been, to your point, this was in 2010. And I think a lot of things have changed in the way of, kickstarting and crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, and like all these things have become more mainstream in the 5 years since I did it. And, there's probably more science to it now than I had at the time. But yeah, I don't let that deter you from trying. Like if somebody says, oh, well, here's the way it has to be done. There's a formula, there's whatever. Okay, fine. Go along with the formula, but don't rule out, I don't know, I guess the hand of fate,
Yeah, and creativity. People have been doing this type of stuff for a long time, long before we were around. So we're not the first generation to invent it. It's just a matter of opportunity and creativity, and you can still get there.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what kind of bike did you end up with?
I have a G650 GS. It's
Oh,
a
very nice.
yeah, for people who are familiar with motorcycles, it's a thumper. It's a dual sport, single cylinder, and it's carried me everywhere I've ever wanted to go.
Great little bikes. You can't kill them.
Mm-mm.
It will take you into the future as long as you want to go.
Exactly. I do expect that I can get probably another, another. I expect I can probably get 150 to 200 out of it before it goes, totally rebuild. I've had some work done to it. I had some issues a couple years ago with bearings in the top side of the engine, and so they had to crack the case, which God sounded like brain surgery. It was really freaky, but at the time, when they did that, they went ahead and recalibrated every single thing, so it's really basically like a new engine, other than that the bearings had to a little problem with the oil pressure pump, but everything else was calibrated. It's in perfect working order, so I feel pretty good about it. I got a good mechanic, and God knows I'm not the mechanic, so I have a really good mechanic I rely on, and keep the chain oiled, and just take it to him for all the things that need to be done. I'm good to go.
Right? That's all you need. So there's a saying that most of us in the motorcycle world know, that you never see a motorcycle out in front of a psychiatrist's office.
I have a pillow on my couch that says that, as a matter of fact.
Well, I bring that up because after dealing with the issues with the failing business and whatnot, it must have been such a relief, a release of pressure, if you will, to actually get out on that motorcycle and just hit the road after that. I know after a busy, stressful day, even if I only have 30 minutes, being out on my motorcycle, it will take care of that. It'll wash it all away from me. But you headed out on a almost every state in the nation trip.
Well, the first trip that I took was 18 states. And, Travis, what was great about that, among many other things, is out on the road, nobody knew me. I mean, I could have told them I was Mavis Parsons if I'd wanted to. And you know what I mean? Like, I could have made up any story I wanted. I could have told them anything about myself. Nobody knew me, right? So that was the beautiful thing for me, having come out of a very rough patch in my life. I could tell people anything I wanted myself. I did not have to tell them what a train wreck I had left, at home. The disaster, all that kind of stuff. No, I just sit down at a stool at a diner and say, "Hey, I'm Tamela from Charlotte, North Carolina. What's good on the menu? I've never eaten here before," and just let the conversation roll. And to everyone I met on the road, they thought I was brave. They thought I was, all these, great, wonderful things. And it was really good for my self-esteem to get such positive feedback and affirmation from people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can see that for sure. So many people might say, you're a single woman, you're crazy to head out on the road. And I don't care if it's America, I don't care if it's a third world country, you get the naysayers. Mm-hmm. Why would you encourage people to go travel by themselves in this way?
Well, you'll never experience a locale or the people in the same way when you're with someone else and you're pressured, not necessarily in a bad way, but but nevertheless, you want to conform and be a good traveling companion, and you don't want to make them, you don't want to whine about every place you want to stop, right? But when you're by yourself, if you see a piece of roadside kitsch that calls to you, you pull over. If you want to linger over a meal with, someone interesting, you linger. It's and you learn a lot about yourself in the doing. And I want to say, we've been sold a story that nobody's trustworthy, the world is a dangerous place, everybody wants to rape and murder you, that the world's full of meth lab motels. Like, like there's all these stories about what a dangerous place the world is. And, I have not traveled the entire world like I know some of your guests have, but I've traveled America where people feel plenty scared enough. And I have been helped. I've run out of gas. I've had my wallet stolen. I've not been able to find a place to sleep at night. I mean, I've had every kind of traveler problem, imaginable. And every time some Good Samaritan has come out of the woodwork to help me out. It's been lovely.
Yeah, it's great to find that out. And I like to ask that question because I, as well as you probably, I read a lot of travel books. And exactly like you said, a lot of people are just afraid of going out and really living out there in the world and traveling through many places that are supposed to be the worst places on earth. But every time you talk to somebody that has done it, not somebody that just hears it on the radio, but you've talked to somebody that's done it, they're always going to come back and say, look, it's not as scary as people tell you.
True.
I got through it just fine.
Yep.
I met the most beautiful and most wonderful people when I went through there. You need to go do it. So I like to reiterate that side of it on our show for sure.
Definitely. And, people, it's funny. I will say as a woman that I'm very careful not to go into places where my intentions may be misperceived. So, I stay, I don't go to bars and, like I said, places where where I might be misperceived. I stay in public places and, any place where there's a crowd is going to be, way more friendly than, a place where there aren't. But still, I don't know. I think we all have intuition. We all have a sixth sense for a reason. And I do listen to that. I'm sure I've been wise to pay attention to that. But I don't have anything ill to report about my experiences.
Hey, I want to give a shout out to our latest patron addition. It is Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, for joining the Patreon team. If you'd like to help the Adventure Sports Podcast, you too can go to patreon.com/Adventure Sports Podcast and sign up. It's a mere $5 a month. It gets you all kinds of goodies and chances to win things, and it gives you a chance to hear episodes that only patrons can hear. So join us, $5 a month. We'll see you there. Thanks, guys. Hey, ASP listeners, have you ever tried a Kind bar? You may have seen them in your local grocery store, coffee shop, or gym. They make delicious, healthy snacks using whole ingredients. Well, if you're ready to try some tasty and healthy snacks, we've got a special deal for you. Try 20 Kind snacks from 7 of their unique product lines with their new snack pack. You can enjoy 50% off and free shipping on your first snack pack when you subscribe to it through their Snack Club. Snack Club is Kind's monthly snack subscription service. Go to kindsnacks.com/sports for more details on that. I love their pressed bars like the mango apple chia bars, or I pretty much guarantee you're going to love their breakfast bars first thing in the morning when you climb out of that hammock. So take a minute and see what they're creating over at kindsnacks.com/sports and get your 50% off plus free shipping on your first order. That's kindsnacks.com/sports. So I was perusing through your website, and one thing I realized as I was looking around at pictures and reading what you had written, that there's a common theme on your site of happiness and contentment. And I think it's really important to bring that up because of the whole reason you started this whole journey. I mean, you were pretty down on life and whatnot. Yeah. And what this has brought to you is just brought this life full of enjoyment and contentment. Would you agree with that?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. It's been not only the places, which are, I've been to some beautiful places, Travis. This country is, the diversity. You've got deserts, canyons, rainforests, mountains, plains. I mean, you've got everything. So the beauty is compelling, and the beautiful people and experiences are as well. The cultures, the food. I love eating at farmers markets when I can. Very often I get to meet, growers, and increasingly at farmers markets you they offer prepared foods, and you'll get regional dishes, made with fresh grown produce. And, food is always a great way to connect with people. There's just been so many wonderful ways to connect. If you pull yourself, I think, away from the more commercialistic sides of travel, stay in motels instead of hotels, meet the proprietor, ask them, did you grow up? Is this a family business? Did you grow up here? It's funny. A lot of times you'll meet a proprietor who, no, I bought this 5 years ago, wanted to escape big city life. You get to know your motel operator and fellow guests. It's just, it's been a real rediscovery of America for me, and an awakening inside of me of the good that's out there. And I'm glad that as an independent reader of my blog, you feel that spirit, because I feel it.
Well, it definitely comes through. You're doing a good job of conveying that, for sure. Good for you. It's funny you bring up the finding food, across America. I have to bring up an episode I did a little while back, and that was with Nathan Millward. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
Nathan rode over here we would call it a Trail 90. He's from England, and he picked up the bike in Australia. Okay. It was an Australian postie bike, so it was actually a 105 cc, but a 110, so little bitty bike.
Yeah.
So he rode that, from Australia back to London, which was a major trip.
No
but
kidding.
Then he went ahead and he rode it from New York City all the way up to Alaska, and I kept cringing because Nathan, unfortunately for him, was on a budget, and I can't knock him for it, but he kept talking about ducking into McDonald's and getting a coffee and some sort of burger, and he needed to use their Wi-Fi. And he had a phenomenal trip. I can never knock it, and I would like to reproduce his trip at the same time. But I was kind of chuckling when you were talking about finding the good places to eat, the farmers markets and whatnot, and I'm relating it back to Nathan's interview where he's ducking into McDonald's so he can get a cheap meal and use their Wi-Fi. And it's two completely different experiences, but both awesome.
Both valid, totally valid. Yeah.
Right.
I have to give him credit. I don't often find great Wi-Fi at the farmer's market. So there you go. But the budget, I mean, you can, you go to a farmer's market, you can get, good food, for not much, and it'll be nice and fresh. I cannot say that about McDonald's.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, you talk about riding all over the country and just finding great places all around, little nooks and crannies and whatnot, and I can relate. I have been riding in the western states, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, I mean, around here, and I still have not hit all of the good roads, even in my own state. In Colorado, we have a 5-day trip. Well, we do. I was just thinking while you were talking about it, I was thinking, we have a 5-day trip. I've ridden all around Colorado. We have a 5-day trip coming up, and we're hitting 2 more great highways that I have never set foot or wheel on. And I was just thinking, it is such an amazing opportunity to have that much space to roam when you have a motorcycle.
Well, and you speak the language, and you don't need a passport. Right. So, America's big, there are 3.8 million square miles in America. I mean, Europe's is basically 3.9. So, go to Europe if you want, but there's plenty to explore here. We have every kind of geographical, geological, whatever, climatological, it's all right here. And when you ride a bike that can go off-road, wow, you have multiplied your options by, I don't know, maybe tenfold over the paved world.
Yeah, probably.
Now, I have to say, I don't go off-road when I'm traveling by myself. I'm not, I've admitted I'm not a capable mechanic, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'll go on light gravel and maybe hard pack and whatever, if they're forestry roads or whatever, they're good roads. But I will not do that. If there's, if I feel like it's just, too risky, and I might not be able to make my way out on
No,
my own power.
you're absolutely right. It's you have to go with buddies when you're off road. In fact, a little sidebar. Last weekend, I went up and was riding my dirt bike off road on some single track, and my buddy had been up there in the morning with me, and then had to go home. Of course, I was out there 11 miles back in the woods, and one of these things did happen. I pulled over to the side of the trail to check, and there's oil dumping out the bottom of my engine. I'm thinking, oh, what did I do? So long story short, I made my way back, and the same as you said, I stumbled upon very helpful people, a couple different groups of them who helped me on my way to get my motorcycle back to my campsite and get it loaded up in my truck. And you do run the risk of that stuff happening, but you also run, I shouldn't say the risk, but you also have the opportunity to meet very helpful people and engage with them and see what their lives are all about at the same time.
To be sure. Of course, if you run out of gas in the middle of nowhere, Montana, you'll get that opportunity too.
Yeah, this is true.
That's happened to me. I was just learning how to ride. I mean, like how to pace myself, and it was let me think. It was my third big road trip. Maybe my second. I can't remember, but I was still, fairly new at all the, ins and outs of, how to pace and all that, and I didn't know how to properly factor in for fuel usage in high winds. And so, as you know, living out west, the space between gas stations can be, profound. And so, so I was in very high winds in Montana, and I could have stopped. I didn't. And then sure enough, between gas opportunities, I was at the side of the road. And, Montana's, not New York City. You got to sort of wait a little while before somebody comes along. And so I stood in the middle I saw a big truck coming, not a 18-wheeler, but it looked like a dually that was coming. And so I stood out in the middle of the road. He was probably half a mile away, and just waved my arms to see if I could get him. And I have to say, I believe one advantage of being a woman is people are probably not as afraid to stop and help me as they might be a man.
Yeah, that's true.
So I waved, and he slowed down, and I wasn't sure, there's it goes both ways, right? Does he want to help me? Do I want to be helped by him, kind of thing? But anyways, when he slowed down and he rolled down the window, first of all, he was in a company truck. And second of all, he was traveling with his long-haired dachshund. I said, a guy who travels with a dog cannot be a bad guy.
That's good.
So I told him what had happened. I said, by chance, because, bike doesn't require much gas at all. I said, by chance, maybe could I siphon, a quart of gas or, whatever, just on the road. I wasn't even asking for anything, major. And he said, jump in the truck. I know the gas station right up here. And I mean, and like I said, the dog sold me on that. So he took me down and got gas, and it was down to their last, they were down to their last little red gas can, that they have for sale. Sure. And they said, you've got to bring this back because this happens all the time. You have got to bring this gas can back. I said, okay, I promise I will. So we took it back, got me on the road, and the guy said, give me the gas can. I'll take it back for you.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah, that's good people for sure.
Good people for sure.
So I heard you mention somewhere about little brown signs, and I wanted to bring that up.
Oh, yeah.
These are the points of interest signs, and I really connected when you were talking about that, because you can go out and ride in groups, and everybody kind of has to deal with whatever everybody else wants to do, like a big flock of birds, or you can ride solo. And you see these little brown signs on the side of the road, And there's nothing greater than pulling off to read the sign and figure out what it's pointing to and going and finding it.
Yes. Oh God, I love little brown signs. But there is a way to travel in a group and get your own way. I did this. I traveled with a companion in 2011. We traveled from New Mexico out to California, all the way up the California coast into Oregon, over to, let me think, we went up to the Columbia River Gorge and then made the turn east and traveled. We broke apart in Missoula, Montana. So we did the Lolo Pass, we did all that. And the way we did that without getting on each other's nerves and trampling on each other's experiences is, we each, decided what did we want to do, how did we want to travel, and we would arrange rendezvous. In the day, I'd say, okay, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, and then if anything happened to either of us, we knew where the other one basically had been in the last 3 or 4 whatever hours. And so that was a way to be safe and at the same time travel with a companion while having your own experience. It worked beautifully.
Yeah, that's great. I also wanted to bring up a little tip from my end. If you're out running around with a group or by yourself, there's an app that Google runs. So I don't know if it's available on iPhone or not, but it's called Google Field Trip.
I have seen that. Yes.
Have you? I've been out on my own. I've been out. I mean, I'm in this whole country is historical, but there's a lot of things that happen in Colorado. I'll be out in the middle of nowhere, and I've pulled up the app just to see what's around me. And sure enough, there'd be an aircraft museum just buried on a farm back in the middle of nowhere. And I just show up on my motorcycle and take a tour of these aircraft. And the app is great for that kind of stuff. So if you like little blue or little brown signs, pull out this app, go out in the middle of nowhere, pull it up and see what it points you to. There's probably something around you that you've never seen and never would have seen.
Oh, that is a great tip. Now, I've used History Here. Have you ever used the History Here app?
No.
Same thing. It's put out by the History Channel people. And same thing, it'll alert you wherever you are. It'll say, you're 1.5 miles from this, that, or the other. Or it'll even tell you if there may not be a museum or a specific attraction per se, but they'll say you're this far from where George Washington's horse broke his leg or whatever.
Right.
So I have to compare. Thank you for the reminder. History Here versus Field Trip, because I have heard of it, but I haven't tested it.
Yeah, I'll do the same. I'm intrigued because I wouldn't call myself a history buff, but I'm really interested in things that happen in the area because, a lot of us spend good money traveling away from where we live. Right. But if you just open your eyes and pay attention to what's going on around you, every little pocket and nook and cranny of this world has something really cool about it. And if you pay attention, you can learn a lot and didn't have to go very far to get it.
10-4. And the funny thing of it is, like, again, we're sort of related to solo travel because you can follow your nose and follow your interests, but you don't have to be a solo traveler to have the experience of having something like this just cross your path and all of a sudden something you had no idea existed, a topic you never knew was interesting, it presents itself and you start to follow your nose and take it deeper. You may have read the post on my site where I talked about discovering FDR's little White House. Did you read that post?
I haven't seen that one. No.
Okay, because I talk about little brown signs. So I was headed home from Alabama. I was coming through rural Georgia, and all of a sudden I came across a little brown sign that had a left turn arrow that said FDR's little White House, 15 miles. And I vaguely kind of remembered what that was, but not really. And I said, okay, I'm in. And it turns out that's where FDR died. He died at the little White House in Warm Springs, Georgia.
Really?
And what I learned when I was there is that much of his domestic legislative agenda was informed by his having had polio. And back in the day, in his day, there was great hope that warm and hot springs could restore all kinds of um, people's ailment, could restore people to robust health from a number of different ailments, including polio. And so that's why he went to Warm Springs in the first place. This was before he was elected. And he fell in love with the area. He fell in love with the people. He bought land. And he started having this little White House built soon after he was elected. Anyway, so he went there every year, I think, except one during his presidency. And what happened is he was, what they didn't know now, we know that he was paraplegic. Well, he had hand controls put on his big Ford convertible, and that was his only way of experiencing true mobility. And he loved to drive that car. And so he would drive it right out into the farmer's fields. He had grown up on an estate, and he was very interested in forestry and farming. And so when he was in rural Georgia, he'd just drive that car right out onto a farmer's field or right up to a doorstep and just start chatting the people up. And that's how he learned, he learned that kids were working in the fields and couldn't afford to go to school. He learned that people didn't have good information about crop rotation, all these kinds of things that was keeping the South impoverished. It cost him as much to heat. He had the little White House was like 1,200 square feet. It cost him more to heat and power the little White House than it did his giant estate in New York, simply because there was no electricity. And that's what led to the rural electrification bill and the Tennessee Valley Authority. All that was because, and more, was because he had had polio and went to Warm Springs, Georgia. Well, so I learned that, and then I got really interested in everything about FDR, and I went to visit his estate in New York, and I went up to Campobello in New Brunswick, which is where he contracted polio. It just opened up this new line of inquiry that I never knew I was interested in, because I followed a little brown sign.
Yeah, follow little brown signs, and you don't know what kind of wormhole you're going to end up in. What kind of rabbit hole.
That's good. I like it. Wormhole. I like it.
As I'm sure you know from listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast, some of the safest and best snow conditions for backcountry skiing of the whole year happen in the springtime. And Bentgate has the gear you need. Come check out the latest in alpine touring, telemark, NTN, and splitboarding gear. They have brands like Black Crows, DPS, Dynafit, G3, Icelantic, K2, Technica Blizzard, Arc'teryx, Mammoth, Solomon, Volley, Neversummer, Jones, and BCA. And you do need to be safe out there. Bentgate has the latest in avalanche safety gear. They have beacons, airbags, shovels, and probes, and they're ready to help you educate yourself on snow safety. They also rent out gear, so you can get your skis and your boots there, as well as your avalanche safety equipment. What's more, they also have free demo ski days at local resorts, so you can try out the latest gear. Now, how much fun does that sound? So swing by Bentgate in Golden, Colorado, or go to bentgate.com to find your new gear, as well as to get updates on all of their events.
The 180 Flame is the ideal alternative to bulky and fragile gas-burning camp stoves. The 180 Flame utilizes fewer parts with minimal weight and maximized reliability. The locking tab and slot design means there are no hinges, welds, or rivets to fail you in the field. Cook your food and boil water quickly using only small amounts of natural fuels including twigs, grass, pine cones, and leaves. Weighing just 6.4 ounces, the 180 Flame is the ideal alternative to a backpacking stove. You can find your new Flame at 180tac.com or a retailer near you. 180 Flame. Think big, pack small. All right, now I want you to tell me what it is to live full throttle, and let's talk about your book of the title.
So, as you know, as a motorcyclist, you always want to be on the power curve. You need, that's where you have your maximum control and power. And some people think full throttle means high speed. No, it doesn't. It means whatever, maybe this is too technical, but whatever gear you're in, you are on it. You're giving your bike power so that if you need to power out of a slide or power out of mud or, just get out of a bad traffic situation or whatever, you've got your power in your hand. You're never like driving along in neutral or whatever like that. So, like I said, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going bat out of hell or fast as you can or hard as you can. It just means that you've always got power. And so, the book, Live Full Throttle, Life Lessons from Friends Who Faced Cancer, was based on the first 2 years that I was riding my motorcycle. I found a group of Canadian and American women who were raising money and awareness for breast cancer causes. And the way that they would do it was to bling up their bikes in pink swag. So a lot of the women had big bikes, big cruisers, full baggers, all that. And so they had acres of real estate for,
Right.
for all this. I didn't. I mean, I've got a little dual sport bike. It's, minimally, minimal real estate. But like some of the women, oh my gosh, feather boas. And one woman, she was so talented. She made a pink sequined slip cover for her bike. I mean, they just really went all out. Well, I put, eventually, I met up with the women at the rally point in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I didn't have hardly anything on my bike, and I felt like I was wearing jeans to a coronation or something. Everybody else was all blinged up. So one of them gave me a pink bra to strap across the windshield of my bike, and that's on the cover of my book. And when I did that, Travis, my whole life changed, because people everywhere would see that pink bra and they didn't know anything about me and they didn't know really what I was about, but they had a clue. They had a clue that I was somehow sympathetic to breast cancer causes. And wherever I stopped, rest stops, scenic overlooks, restaurants, gas stations, people would approach me and they would want to tell me their story. It might have been their diagnosis. It might have been a coworker, a loved one. A lot of stories began with, I want to tell you about my mom. Because I think people people want to talk about, a loved one or maybe their personal experience. And maybe they feel that they've sort of worn out their story with people who know them. And here's a stranger who, you can just tell your story to. And I was unprepared for that. And it was such a bounty, being able to hold space for people who needed someone to talk to. So I heard about not just breast cancer. I heard about a lot of different cancers. I had no idea there was so much. I'm not a medical professional.
Right.
But, so what I learned from these stories is that, the first thing someone thinks when they get a cancer diagnosis is, oh my God, I'm going to die. But Travis, that's true for all of us. And what in a lot of different ways I learned is that when you get a diagnosis like that, if you think, okay, given where I am right now, how can I live a full throttle life, right? You might be in first gear, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, but wherever you are, how can you really live your best life right now? So they taught me a lot about living a better life because they had frankly faced their death. And so there are 8 lessons, life lessons that I had learned from these stories that I heard on the road. And that's what I share in my book.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, what a gift for you to stumble into that situation.
Stumble in is right.
Yeah. I mean, a serendipitous event is what that was. I mean, I would think that on the surface, I or many people would say, I don't really want to get into the situation where I'm hearing about medical problems, because that's on the surface, that seems like what it is. But as you explain what what it is these people are able to share with you. And I'm sure it's completely therapeutic for them and helps them work through it themselves. What a gift it is for you to be able to help them with that and share that with them. That's a pretty sweet moment.
Yeah, we're all here for each other, Travis. You know, we are hardwired for connection. I enjoy solo travel, make no bones about it, but I don't want to be 5 weeks and never see a human being.
Right.
I enjoy the connection, and we're all here for each other. That's what we're here for.
Well, absolutely. Well, I'm going to have to check out your book. I haven't yet, but it sounds like it's full of inspiration for those of us who are just getting through our daily lives and trying to get the important things nailed down. We lose sight of the important things. So tell me about your new book you're working on.
Oh, fear. Yeah. Well, what I'm learning, I mean, we all face fear. And the question that I'm most often asked, which you asked, is, aren't you afraid? I mean, you didn't ask it in that way, but people always want to know what's my take on fear, because I do something. First of all, not everybody would feel comfortable riding motorcycles. Secondly, as a woman. Thirdly, solo. So I've got this trifecta of, risky behavior in some people's minds.
Sure.
And so I'm always asked, that's the most frequent question I'm asked, not where's the most beautiful place you've been or, anything like that. It's always, aren't you afraid? And so I decided to take on fear. And what I've learned is that psychologists tell us that every fear you can possibly come up with is boils down to only one of 5. So at one end of the spectrum, there's humiliation. At the other end of the spectrum is death. So humiliation is purely psychological. Death is purely physical. So between them is a bunch of, moving from, white to black, if you will. There's all these shades of gray. So you go humiliation, separation, loss of autonomy, mutilation, and death. So if I were to tell you a story and 12 other people were in the room, if I were to tell you a scary story from my travels, for example, I were to ask you to categorize the fear you were feeling on my behalf as one of those 5: humiliation, separation, loss of autonomy, mutilation, or death. All 12 people might have categorized it, let's say mutilation. Okay, let's say all 12 people categorized it that way. But each of the 12 people would have a different reason behind that, because fear, each of us has our own history with fear, our own response with fear. And it's that journey that I want to invite people to go into. Now the other option, of course, is that all 12 people, would run the spectrum of, all 5 of those fears. They'd be, dispersed between the 5, but which is fine. But what I'm learning is that we tend toward 1 or 2 of these fear categories. So some people might always tend toward the purely physical, the death and dismemberment side, and other people might tend toward the the more emotional side. And when you start to understand your history with fear and your journey with fear, then you can start to harness the message that it has for you in your life. Because fear is a great messenger. It's designed to get your attention and get you to make some changes. Sometimes the change is simply thinking something through in a better way, so that then the prefrontal cortex of your brain can say to the reptile brain, okay, we got this, settle down, right? But there's always a reason that you experience fear. And when you learn to work with it, your life will be much better. So that's what I'm exploring in this book. So
that's very cool.
I may want to interview some of your listeners, some of your, former guests, as I get going further into the anecdotes and such. So if it's okay, put in the show notes that please, if you've got a story about, a fearful situation, or maybe something a question you have about fear, I would really love hearing from people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have plenty of people that have faced fears, and some of them seem like they don't have any fear whatsoever, which is a little maybe
Well,
a problem in and of itself.
yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, we all have different thresholds for sure.
It's a healthy thing to
Yeah,
have, well, especially when you're on a motorcycle.
exactly. Otherwise, you just make bad choices.
Well, those sound like two excellent books. Can you tell the listeners where they can find them? Where are the best places to follow you, Tamela Rich?
Oh, well, it's very easy. If you can spell my name, that's how you'll find me. TamelariCh.com. So that's my website. And I'm on the social channels, Twitter at Tamela Rich, Facebook, Tamela Rich Author. Those are the main places that that I'm active. And I do offer, if anyone's interested, I do offer what's called the Daily Getaway. The Daily Getaway is an email subscription. It's a photograph from my travels and an inspirational quote. That's it. Every day I've got a couple hundred people that have subscribed, and every morning at 4:00 local time, you'll get an email with a photograph and an inspirational quote. It's a really easy way to start your day off on the right foot. You can get that at my website.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to sign up for that myself. I think as I write it down here, Daily Getaway.
Daily Getaway.
I think everybody needs that inspiration. And as I was mentioning to you, the point of our podcast is to hopefully inspire people to get out there and try some of these really cool things that they hear about on the show. So it only helps to have a little tickler email in the morning to do so as well. So that's cool. I will definitely put all of that stuff in the show notes.
Thank you.
People can come find you. Very good. So what's next? You've traveled a bunch of this country, just about every state. You have a few more to hit. Do you plan on hitting them? Do you plan on going to Europe or Central and South America, Africa? What's on your schedule, on your bucket list, shall I say?
On my bucket list. Well, I was funny. I rarely watch TV, but yesterday my husband had the Tour de France on. And I was watching, those hill climbs and those switchbacks, and I was thinking, oh man, that's a great place to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So no doubt there are some wonderful places abroad. The Stelvio Pass, and maybe I didn't pronounce that right, in Italy in the Alps. I just drool over that picture. It's just, I don't know how many miles it is. I have to look it up. But anyway, I've seen so many photographs of it, and the Dolomites, and all these wonderful places. So of course I'd like to go there. But what I'm going to do, I don't have it scheduled yet, but I have this strange donut hole in my travels in Oklahoma. I've been in every state surrounding Oklahoma. Oklahoma is it's my 48th state on my bike. I've traveled everywhere except Alaska, traveled, but as far as on my bike, Oklahoma is the place that I'm missing. And what I'm going to do is, I do enjoy history, as we've discussed. And President Andrew Jackson was born in the county adjoining the one that I live in. He was born, and they don't know the exact, geological spot, but it's somewhere about 20 miles from me. And we have in Cherokee, North Carolina, we have the Eastern Band of the Cherokees. And the tie together of Oklahoma, Andrew Jackson, and Cherokee, North Carolina is that Andrew Jackson is responsible for the Trail of Tears. And that's why the Cherokees have have a large reservation in Oklahoma. The Eastern Band of the Cherokees in Cherokee, North Carolina, where I just was last week working on my book, they resisted the Trail of Tears. And so they're still here in North Carolina. So I've got this historical connection to, a tragic time in our nation's history. And I'd like to explore the Trail of Tears between here and Oklahoma. There were several trails that people took. I'm very likely to write a memoir about that experience, or at least a short book or something. I think it's compelling, and especially in this time when ethnic issues and diversity and so on are so with us in the news cycle, and I want to explore some of the roots of these troubles, these strifes,
Right.
on the road. And so the Trail of Tears is my first foray into that.
I think that sounds like a great idea. That would make a fantastic trip, and areas, again, another area that's so steeped in history that there's just, you could spend a lifetime learning about it.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Well, certainly if you're get down to Oklahoma, you have to get up into the Ozarks. What a beautiful place that is to ride.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, I have not fully explored the Ozarks. I mean, well, 3.8 million square miles. There's plenty to explore, right?
You got plenty more to go, right?
Yeah, so that's what's next for me. What's next for you?
Oh, the problem with doing this podcast is my bucket list has grown longer than my pen had ink for. And we're not even close. So, I mean, it's everything. You talk about the Dolomites and riding over in the Alps in Europe. My wife does not ride motorcycles, but I keep telling her when the kids are out, we're going over there. I don't care if we have to rent a motorcycle.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend the entire time on the trip riding. Give me a few days. We can go out together. Maybe I'll go out a little bit by myself, but I have to ride over there. It just looks absolutely amazing. So
I know.
That is definitely big on my bucket list. Alaska, I still have to hit Alaska. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, down through Central and South America. I've read many a book about those trips, and every time I read one, I drool at the thought.
Now, can you speak Spanish?
No, I'm going to have to learn really quickly.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to have to do the Rosetta Stone or something like that.
Exactly.
Although I haven't used Google Translate. That's an app that I'm hearing that people can at least make their way to the bathroom or, order food with. So I haven't tried it, but technology is our friend, I think, in this regard.
Wow, absolutely. Well, I figured as long as I have Baño and Chile Reno,
there you go.
Then I'll survive at least, right? All right. So to wrap the episode up, can you give me just a great story to end up with?
Oh, I love this one. I pulled into a gas station in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. Let me think. It was in Hill City, Kansas, which you wouldn't know where that is. It's just in the middle of nowhere.
No, I don't.
A dot on the map. Anyway, I pulled over for gas. I was on my way to Nicodemus National Monument, and I wanted to make it before the end of the day. I like to take my time traveling, but sometimes you just got to be somewhere. And this was one of those times I had to be there. So pulled in for gas. And just as we've discussed, I like to engage locals. I like to find local restaurants that are owned by, local people who chop the vegetables themselves and, serve it on real plates. And so I saw this guy cutting across the tarmac there at the gas station. He was carrying a couple of shopping bags. And I thought he must be a local. So I said, hey, I'm just passing through. I want to grab a bite to eat. Have to be about, an hour up the road here. But, I asked him where would he recommend that I grab a bite to eat. And he said, I don't know. He said, I'm just passing through myself. I just went up to the grocery store. I'm walking over to my motel, gonna, stop for the night. I said, oh, tell me about your travels. Turns out he was a fry cook from Massachusetts. He got a diagnosis of macular degeneration. He quit his job. He flew out to Seattle where his brother was getting married. And he decided he was going to walk home and see America before he went blind.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
Wow,
Isn't
that's
that
profound.
great? I mean, like, I was just like, oh my God, I want to talk to this guy, but I was so torn because I had to be where I had to be. And so I asked him, I asked him several, I thought I was, doing something. Here's a guy who's walking. And mind you, he's gone from Seattle to Kansas on foot. And so I was just asking him about like how he was doing it and what kind of gear he had. He said, gear? I said, yeah, like what kind of shoes you been wearing? He said, he said, just pointed down to the ground. He said, I picked these up for $15 at the Walmart. They're working just fine for me.
He said, yeah, I get shoes every state. Whatever I can find, I'm sure.
I mean, now, here's a guy who's going to lose his vision. And is he lamenting it? No, he's taking action. He's walking across America while he can still see it.
Wow.
I love that.
Good for him.
Yeah.
What an amazing story.
Love that.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting me share the hour with you. It's been a joy.
It was my pleasure. I was honored to. And I want to say, next time you're out in Colorado, and I'm sure you'll get out here, so no excuses.
No excuses.
I want you to look me up. I would be honored to take a day ride with you. And
that'd be great. Yes, please.
Spend a day sharing some of these stories.
I'd love to. And I'd love to meet your wife and kids.
Great. Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much, Tamela.
Thank you, Travis. See ya.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast in this episode with Tamela Rich. Make sure you visit us on Patreon at patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast, and do make sure this summer that you get out and have some fun.